Hello and welcome to today's podcast where we're going to offer a solution for alleviating the bottlenecks that many fulfillment operations are starting to realize at Packout. My name is Michael Levins and I'm Group Editorial Director of Peerless Media's Supply Chain Group, and I'll be your host for this session that's being sponsored by Packurit. And Packurit is a cartonization software company that reduces fulfillment costs and wasted material by finding the optimal way to pack every shipment in real time. As e-commerce continues its rapid growth, warehouse and distribution center managers are under increasing pressure to optimize every stage of the fulfillment process. Now, indeed, cartonization, now that's the process of selecting the most efficient way to pack every order, is proving to be a critical tool in reducing costs, minimizing waste, and improving shipping efficiencies. Now, many fulfillment centers, as we well know, have automated with solutions such as goods to person or AMRs, and which has improved the picking process for sure, but has pushed the bottleneck downstream. Now, packout, as we know, the final stage in the packing process where items are prepared for shipping, is now a new area of focus. Indeed, packout efficiency is now more critical than ever, and it's the last step before an order leaves the warehouse. Any delays or inefficiencies at the stage can have a ripple effect, impacting delivery times and customer satisfaction, and that's where we're all trying to overcome. And now that challenge for many managers is just finding ways to alleviate these new bottlenecks, as well as streamlining and optimizing the fulfillment process from beginning to end. I think that's what we're all looking to do these days. Well, the good news is that there's a solution for alleviating these bottlenecks. And to help explain how we can get there, today I'm joined by Greg Walls, and Greg is Vice President of Revenue at Packurit. Thanks for joining us today, Greg. I'm so thrilled you can join us.
Thank you for having me on, Mike. It's good to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, that's right. You did one of these with us a couple months before. Now, Greg, just before we get rolling here, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background in the industry. And actually, I'd like to learn a little bit more about that title. That's an interesting title, Vice President of Revenue.
Yeah, sure, Mike. Happy to do so. So I'm Vice President of Revenue at Packurit, and all that means is that in addition to sales and pre-sales responsibility, I also help oversee marketing and solutions design.
What are some of those overall issues, some of those problems operations managers are facing today as it relates to fulfillment? What are you seeing when you're having these conversations with clients?
Yeah, it's a good question to start with, Mike. And you alluded to some of it in your introduction, which was great, by the way. And, we got a position open for you when you're ready, Mike.
Oh, sure. You got it.
You mentioned something actually that's kind of interesting, which is that a lot of focus has been on the picking process in the past couple of years. And that's actually where, we had Six Rivers systems were focused with our time. And especially during this sort of heavy labor crunch of the COVID years, it made a lot of sense. Picking is typically where you have most of your staff, and especially during peak times, that can be really challenging to staff appropriately. So you turn to automation, right? So in the past, call it 7-8 years, there's been a flood of venture capital money, a lot of awesome new robotics startups, automation companies. You have legacy players like AutoStore that have continued to sort of dominate in the upper enterprise segments. And all of a sudden, everybody has these great picking processes, but realizing that, what else needs to be fixed? My industrial engineering friends will laugh at this, but, the bottleneck just moves. That's really the way that this works. And so where's the bottleneck now? We start to hear a lot of people talk about the bottleneck at packout. And, especially as omni-channel fulfillment continues to grow and grow and grow, and people look at consolidating warehouses and doing more channels out of one building, these packing scenarios can get actually more and more complex and challenging. Units of measure come in, master cartons versus inner packs. You have kind of normal parcel versus LTL and case. And so all of a sudden, the packing has become this new focus area for a lot of folks as they sort of are satisfied with what they've done on the picking side, and they move to look at the next bottleneck in the process.
Yep, gotcha. Now, Greg, now let's look at some of the technologies that exist out there now that can help solve some of these bottlenecks at Packout. What are some of the technologies that are now readily available for our listeners today that they can apply to help solving some of those bottleneck problems?
Yeah, sure. And Packout has seen its own sort of evolution of technology, I'll say. But in the old days, the first big automation initiative were slam lines, right? Simple labeling and applying machines, and your carton would go down the line and it would get the label applied, and that was step one of the automation. We eventually moved on as an industry to carton erectors, so being able to sort of spit out and do all the pre-folding and gluing and things that a human might normally have had to do in the old days. And now, sort of where the industry has moved to are these box on demand type machines, right size packaging. And so everybody knows Pack Size. They're probably the number one player in this space, at least in North America. and you have a couple of smaller companies like Ranpak or Spark or CMC who are sort of all have different flavors of that. But the real key there is the idea that these automation companies can now provide a sort of quote unquote perfectly sized packaging
Hmm.
if their cartonization is good, which is we'll talk a little bit
Right.
here. But they can provide a perfect size carton to sort of drive up that volume utilization and really try to minimize the waste that's kind of endemic in our parcel fulfillment world.
Yep. No, absolutely no question there. Now, we did mention cartonization, obviously. So let's focus a little bit more on cartonization. A lot of folks are, maybe aware of that of the concept. Can you give us a sort of a definition and a quick explanation, Greg, of cartonization and where it fits in?
Yeah, sure. So cartonization is the process of using an algorithm to best fit multiple 3D items into the densest or lowest cost packing arrangement.
Got it.
In English, that basically
Hmm.
just means it's a program that can power a box on demand machine or a right size packaging machine and essentially do all of the math, the complex, complicated math. You can imagine having two or three weird shaped items in your hand and trying to sort of rotate them or line them up or move them around to find out what that sort of minimum total volume they can
Hmm.
do together. And where this gets really complex, and I'll just give one simple example, which seems to be an example that people still have a lot of trouble with, but think about something like hats. So a
Hmm.
hat comes down the line. You can actually stack a hat quite nicely into itself,
Hmm.
right? However, even that simple idea of being able to stack an item into another one requires some complex computational power and some sort of features that a lot of frankly modern day WMSs still don't even have. And
Right.
so it's sort of problems like that abound in the cartonization world. And so our technology is kind of the new take on that with a lot of different ways to handle sort of these specialized scenarios. And
Yep.
cartonization is not a new idea, and I want to be clear to that. It's one of the things that we open with some of our sales conversations. It's not a
Hmm.
new idea, right? It's not an invention of ours, but the way we've done it and the way we can drive extra efficiency out of it has, to your point earlier, a pretty big ripple effect on the overall
Yep.
weight in the supply chain and ultimately
Yep.
the transportation cost. So
Yep.
that's kind of where the value of that technology comes in.
So, Greg, you alluded to the fact that maybe Pacurate does this, a little bit differently, or takes another approach to cartonization. Can you kind of, how does Pacurate approach cartonization? Can you tell us how you guys differentiate yourselves in the market?
Yeah, happy to. And there's really three key areas. One is pure simple speed. So there are some legacy players out there, but we are almost roughly 10x the speed of them from an API
Hmm.
response time. And speed actually has means more than just sort of an API response time, because we are a cloud-based solution. One of the things you quickly discover when you try to begin going down the cartonization rabbit hole is the math involved gets pretty complex as far as supply chain goes. Right, we're not talking
Yep.
about the mechanics or anything here, but the math gets pretty complex and requires quite a bit of processing power. So, hence why so many WMSs today, especially ones that are on premise, have these sort of handicapped shortcuts to cartonization
Hmm.
that result in these subpar cartonization results. Well, we use Google Cloud and we can spin up all the processing power in the world we need to get that densest, nicest cubic fit there.
Yep.
Second would be what we call our cost aware element. And this is
Hmm.
something that's really interesting and getting a lot of interest from the enterprise segment of the market. And what that means is we can actually take a rate card, a negotiated rate card, inclusive
Yep.
of factors and all of that minimums, and actually analyze that as part of the cartonization routine. And the simple example I give to people of why that matters is with some of the games that FedEx and USPS play these days with these
Yep.
rate cards, it can oftentimes be cheaper to split a package into two orders, two
Right.
cartons,
Right.
or the opposite. Sometimes you may look at saying, well, we can only fit these into two small packages, but a larger one make more sense with a dim weight element added to it. Again, we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8% of added savings, but when you're looking at a yearly transportation bill of $30 million to
Yep.
UPS or FedEx, that can add up to quite a lot of money.
Absolutely significant. So, Greg, if you were to boil down some of those core benefits Pacurate brings, what would those be? The core benefits.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are trying to reduce the transportation cost of the
Yep.
order, take that cost per order and knock it down 30, 40, 50 cents. We've had some customers reduce it as far as over $1 per package, which is
Yep. Wow.
cool. And second, and more importantly, in my mind, and at least some of the folks at my company, trying to remove the waste from the supply chain. And
Yep.
everybody has had that experience of getting a tiny little item in a giant box, and
Yep.
you just feel in the bottom of your stomach there should be a better way. Like it
Yep.
just feels wasteful, and sure, it doesn't happen all the time, and but everybody's got an experience with that. And I'll tell
Hmm.
you this, Mike, we have a little hall of sadness that we run internally.
Yeah.
There are some surprisingly big U.S. retail players that are consistently sent into us that still have
Yep.
really poor packaging. And you just think about multiply that across millions of orders and how much extra corrugated is that out in the world?
Yep.
It's just wasteful. And so, the value savings and the dollar saved, especially in 2024 with some of the economic challenges we're facing and still a little bit of this COVID hangover in supply chain. I
Yep.
understand that's always sort of the primary value driver that we sort of talk about. But
Hmm.
what's kind of nice is we hear, especially from sort of the executives that we speak with, there's once again a growing interest in the sort of green side of things.
Yep.
And it's nice to have a call it a win-win scenario where you can both save money and reduce waste, which
Hmm.
unfortunately is not very common in the sort of green initiative world.
Yep, absolutely, great. Now, so Greg, let's spin out a little bit. What are some of those other or some of those other benefits besides increased throughput and does cartonization or right sizing bring to operations? And actually, how what's the benefit it brings to alleviating that pack out strain?
Yeah. So, this is actually one of my favorite subjects to talk about. It's mostly
Hmm.
I have a pretty heavy engineering and solutions background. So
Yep.
two more things I would put out there for the world.
Sure.
One is that as part of a cartonization routine, if you don't have cartonization today or any kind of box suggestion, right off the bat, you're going to get a benefit with your temporary labor. And
Yep.
packing has traditionally been one of those areas of the warehouse where people want to keep their experienced folks because packing is a little bit complex. There's complex rules associated with it sometimes, especially in 3PLs. So right off the bat, you get a little bit of a benefit from a labor perspective.
Yep.
And we actually have the ability in our tool, if the WMS or ERP or OMS can support it, to actually display a 3D graphic of the
All
pack,
right.
information
Mm-hmm.
about where to put the items, what each item should be, color coded. It's quite nice. And actually, we've had a lot of reports from some of our customers. We've never really sold on this as an ROI, but they've
Mm-hmm.
reported there's been some kind of labor savings by having pack out be just a little bit faster, right? So
Yep.
there's that bottleneck alleviation
Huge. Yep.
on a much more esoteric perspective and one that we're working very hard to figure out how to educate the market. We sort of have a thesis, and this is why our company was born and why we've had such crazy growth over the past couple of years. Cubic utilization is sort of key to
Yep.
almost every part of the supply chain. You think about all the way from inventory storage to how do you utilize an AMR better. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I'll tell you from Six River Systems is
Yep.
whether it's Locust or Six Rivers or Onward or Robust, utilizing your automation platform, fitting more items on there, which is typically based on some kind of cartonization routine, will actually drive up your UPH and drive
Yep.
down your overall cost and up your ROI. So we
Absolutely.
kind of have this thesis that we sort of want to become call it the 3D space optimizer for
Yep.
all supply chain. That's kind of a dream that we have here. And while we're starting with this simple solution, or I shouldn't say simple, but straightforward problem of cartonization, at least in our mind, I think there's a ton of opportunity in supply chain to
Yep.
reevaluate how cubic space is utilized. And again, whether it's
Absolutely.
inventory, automation, picking carts, it's everywhere. 3D
Yep.
space is everywhere, and being able to better utilize it is only going to remove more waste and save more money for everybody.
Absolutely, Greg. It's interesting too. For I've been covering these markets for over 20 years now, and that whole sustainability conversation's been going on that for longer than that. And what we have always said was, you can start by optimizing the space, right? Just what you had mentioned. That is a terrific way to start your sustainability journey and save money. That's what a green operation is, or a sustainable operation is, right? I mean, so you already have that going, and it's low hanging fruit for a lot of people, and they don't take advantage of it. So we have a few minutes left, Greg, and can you now that we have a pretty good grasp of cartonization and its role. I mean, can you share maybe one quick so real world example, the benefits of cartonization? Is there like a mini case study, or what does it look like when it's in action for our listeners today?
Yeah, happy to. And we actually just released a new case study probably about a month or two
Oh,
ago. So
great.
we can
Hmm.
talk about that one. It's with a company called Barrett Distribution Center. So they're a
Hmm.
3PL based out of my own hometown or area of Massachusetts. So
Nice.
one of the few supply chain companies or 3PLs, I should say, in this area.
Yep.
Barrett has always been a very forward-looking company when it comes to technology, and with our cartonization solution, there was the same kind of appetite to evaluate it. So they've actually been replacing their legacy cartonization routine algorithm with ours over the past 6 months. Had a
Hmm.
ton of success. One of their clients actually has realized about a 6% transportation
Oh,
savings and
wow.
a 34% reduction in corrugated usage um, by both a combination of using our API to actually do the cartonization and using our simulation platform, which we haven't talked too much about today,
Hmm.
but is actually another part of our product, which basically allows you to use historical data and resize the actual boxes you stock. So going back to that idea of sort of right size packaging, if you can't afford the actual machinery or equipment to make those right size boxes, there's a way to use data to basically figure out mathematically what is the set of boxes I should stock. So
Right.
Barrett uses both sides of our technology, and through those kind of combined analysis efforts, we drove that reduction in both cost and corrugated for that customer, and actually allowed them to sort of help with some of the retention conversations, which is another sort of value play that we're hearing from a lot of 3PLs that we speak with about
Yeah.
this type of
Yeah,
technology.
fantastic. Yeah, terrific example. Absolutely terrific example. So, Greg, we are up against the clock. So, just as we wrap up here, for any managers, warehouse managers, DC managers, fulfillment folks who are challenged right now and they're listening right now, what's a practical first step to take to evaluate, opportunities within their pack out process? What would you like to leave them with in terms of, sort of solving that challenge?
Yeah, I think there's two things. So, put my old industrial engineering hat on. Time studies are always good, right? Find out what the
Hmm.
process is, what is taking so much time, what
Yep.
is the variance in that time, and speak to your packers. I'm shocked sometimes. I've been
Yep.
doing solution design for a long time, and sometimes just asking the packers what the problems are can really help you understand where to hone in on the bottlenecks.
Hmm.
So kind of number one would be just evaluating that current pack out process. Two would be looking across some of the tools that you have, or kind of what is the next step for a tool. Whether that's going to be a right size automation packaging, whether it's a carton erector, a slam line. One of the basic steps you can take to preempt any kind of automation discussion when it comes to pack out is actually looking at your dimensions. So,
Hmm.
not just us, but basically anybody in the automated pack out world typically relies heavily on the dimensions in one way or another. And that's one of the first things we encourage people to look at is take a look at your item master. Look, nobody has perfect dimensions. We don't expect perfect dimensions. That's not the point. But
Yep.
we talk about kind of an 80-20 rule. And so, you got your time studies done. You feel like you've identified some bottlenecks in the pack out process. You're ready to start talking about some kind of tool or technology to help, whether it's cartonization or automation of some sort. Step one would be to make sure your DIMs are correct, and then you can kind of
Hmm.
a whole world of automated machinery or software to help you with some of these bottlenecks.
Absolutely critical. That last point you just mentioned, Greg. Absolutely. Well, Greg, we are up against the clock, and I just want to thank Greg Wallace, Vice President of Revenue at Packuret. Greg, great conversation today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, and thanks everybody for listening today. Have a terrific day, and thank you.